Welcome, fellow travelers of the Forgotten Roads and Wanderers of Wilds, to the Verdant Enclave. I'm your host and sometimes friendly DM. More relevant to today's discussion, I'm also your fellow wanderer and wilderness guide to the Ranger class of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Let's talk battle damage.
Before we get started, I'd like to take this opportunity to cover some details in this new format for analyzing the battle performances of the different characters. I've had to change the formula for the baseline comparison, and I'd also like to outline some of the house rules we use during play.
The formula Chris at Treatmonk's Temple uses variables which, while including the possibilities of the game, unfortunately degrade the overall accuracy of the formula, as it adds in possibility without regard for the fact that the chance doesn't factor into averages. Advantage, disadvantage, and critical hits are outliers of battle data, not constants, whereas making attacks and hits are constants. Further, his method calculates for the round. While this isn't necessarily a problem, it isn't working well with the manner I've been tracking damage for the Land of the Hunter. Consequently, I've modified Chris's approach, first by removing those variable components of the formula, thereby reducing it to the more basic form of chance to hit and average of damage dice plus the appropriate modifiers. I chose a base armor class of 15 to determine the basic chance to hit, and then ran the numbers as average per hit rather than per round.
There are 3 house rules we use that do have a small impact on the outcomes of battle analysis. First up is massive damage. If an enemy creature is reduced to 1 HP by a single attack, I have that creature roll a Constitution saving throw. If they then fail the DC that I set, then I rule it as massive damage, and the creature dies instantly. This can result in an opponent being removed earlier than they would otherwise, thereby reducing the chances of gathering further data. Second is glancing blow. When an attack misses by 1 point below the targeted armor class, I allow the hit regardless, but I award resistance against that particular attack's damage to the targeted creature. This can inflate the actual number of hits the characters earn, as well as the attacks that they make, and the amount of damage they accrue, since I record the damage as rolled, rather than accounting for resistance or vulnerability. However, it does mean that the characters have to keep fighting those who survive, so they still have to earn their victory. And finally, critical hits. Per the player's handbook, a natural 20 on an attack doubles all the damage dice for that attack. Rather than simply doubling the relevant dice, I allow critical hits to maximize the damage of the doubled dice, and we roll the regular dice as normal. This can result in very high numbers if characters manage to score several critical hits, and even more so for the rogue, who gets to double all of their sneak attack damage to the maximum, plus the normal sneak attack damage dice. The following aren't technically house rules per se, but they are things to keep in mind as we go through the numbers gathered from gameplay. First, all players, including the Dungeon Master player character, are all using strictly Player's Handbook material. Second, every combat encounter, excepting a few calculation errors in early gameplay, has been and will continue to be rated a deadly encounter from the Dungeon Master's Guide, with one caveat. When calculating the experience for the encounter, I skip entirely modifying the experience points for multiple monsters. Now, this does not result in easier combats, Rather, it increases the danger the characters face, with the express intention of pushing the characters to use all their features, abilities, and players' wits to their utmost, while providing the most opportunity to collect as much relevant data as possible. Third, I quite enjoy homebrewing magical items for the characters and working them into the world of the game, so certain unusual things might occur, such as a player armor class of 25, but I also make them earn those very powerful items, while at the same time restricting all access to any plus insert number here weapons. Given the enhanced deadly nature of the combats, I also allow many of the optional combat rules provided in the Dungeon Master's Guide, including cleaving through creatures, though it has been modified to include ranged attacks instead of just melee. I've used the words damage rolled several times, but it was brought to my attention that this could be misleading, especially in regard to area of effect abilities if I otherwise say something like damage dealt or shatter dealt this much damage. The number rolled on the dice is not the same as the damage dealt in such cases. For example, if I as the ranger use Hail of Thorns, I roll the damage once and apply that to all affected creatures. If I use the terminology of dealt, then I should be accounting for the damage dealt to all the affected creatures. This, however, can be something that might end up being visually unverifiable, as I do not always have the recording screen aligned properly. For the sake of clarity and transparency, then, I have been and will continue attempting to record only the damage rolled, as that is visually verifiable in the chat window. Keep in mind that this could potentially undersell the value of certain AoE abilities and spells, since I won't be reporting how much total is dealt. I could try to report on the number of creatures affected, as well as whether they succeeded or failed on any relevant saving throws, but it will be a major alteration to the style of reporting previously done. If you want me to start tracking those details as well, please let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I will continue as I have been. There have been two primary questions I am examining in this adventure, but I chose to add an extension to one of them, as it is a statement I've heard before in relation to rangers. The original two questions are, does the ranger need Hunter's Mark in order to do comparable damage? And, are fighters better as archers than rangers? The extended question is, do rangers need their spells in order to keep up with martial class damage output? To clarify, comparable should be understood as equivalent. In other words, in order for the question to be regarded as yes, then rangers would have to use Hunter's Mark in order to do the same damage as a fighter or a paladin or a rogue, or any of the other martial classes. If Hunter's Mark is not needed in order to accomplish comparability, then the question would be answered no.
Let's get started with Thea the Rogue, Thief subclass, level 16. Of the subclass features, Thea used Fast Hands 5 times successfully, Second Story Work 20 times in order to get into better or necessary positions for combat, and Supreme Sneak 2 times. Use Magic Device was used 1 time. General abilities are those abilities which anyone can have or choose, such as feats, of which Thea has Athlete, Dual Wielder, Sharpshooter, and Skulker. Athlete was used 16 times to overcome movement restrictions and outmaneuver opponents. Dual Wielder was used 15 times to somewhat increase offensive options, but also to gain +1 to armor class. Sharpshooter was used 15 times successfully out of 18 uses, adding 150 points to Thea's total damage rolled for this level, which is 7% of the level's total. Skulker was used to mitigate disadvantage on perception checks, hide, or remain hidden successfully 6 times. Over the course of level 16, Thea made 45 attacks, 35 of which were hits, for a hit ratio of 77.78%. Using her haste charm, Thea was able to add 4 more attacks and 4 more hits, for an improved hit ratio of 79.59%. Class features refers specifically to core class abilities such as Cunning Action, the rogue ability to hide, disengage, and dash, with a bonus action instead of an action. Thea used her bonus action to hide successfully 26 times, 4 times to disengage, and dash 11 times. Uncanny Dodge was used 4 times to reduce damage taken by 32 points, and Evasion was used once for half damage instead of full, while Reliable Talent was used 80 times successfully. Thea used a Bead of Force for 44 points of damage. As mentioned before, Sharpshooter contributed 150 points of damage. For weapon damage, Thea rolled 367 points of damage, while Sneak Attack dice added 1,073 points, producing a total of 2,008 points of damage rolled for the level. Looking at the average per hit, weapons only, Thea achieved 10.49, which is 0.71 below the baseline for this level. However, when all applicable damage, excluding the Bead of Force damage, as that is reliant on a saving throw, and instead of attack rolls, is added in, Thea's average per hit becomes 50.36, which is 39.16 above the baseline. Let's move on to Adren, the fighter, Eldritch Knight subclass, level 16. General abilities are features which anyone can choose and use, while subclass features are limited. As a fighter's access to magic is a subclass choice, Adren's magic usage for level 16 will be reported here. For his subclass features, Adren used Eldritch Strike 1 time this level, though it did not succeed. War Magic was used 2 times to action, cast a cantrip, and bonus action, attack with a weapon. Message was used 5 times. Firebolt was used 5 times, producing 51 points of damage, which is 4% of this level's total damage rolled. Expeditious Retreat was used 3 times for 6 dashes. Shield was used 8 times. Scorching Ray was used once, causing 12 points of damage, or 1% of damage rolled. Gust of Wind was used 2 times. Lightning Bolt was used 2 times for 76 points, another 6% of level damage rolled. Fireball was used 2 times for 73 points of damage, including an environmental effect of an additional 17 points. Keep in mind that this is only reporting the damage rolled, not the damage dealt. Lightning Bolt and Fireball affected more than one creature at a time each time they were cast, so this does not represent the damage dealt, only the damage rolled. Warcaster was used roughly 4 times to cast spells while hands were full, and 10 times for advantage on Constitution saving throws against damage for concentration. Mobile was used to negate difficult terrain 0 times, and to negate attacks of opportunity 6 times. Alert was used distinctively 2 times to avoid being taken by surprise. Over the course of level 16, Adren made 111 attacks, 99 of which were hits, for a 89.19% hit ratio. Magic damage was covered already, but is summarized here. From class features, Adren used Second Wind 4 times, gaining 79 hit points. Action Surge was used a total of 4 times, gaining another 77 points of damage, 8% of level damage rolled. Indomitable was used 3 times, but to no positive effect. For weapon damage alone, Adren rolled 919 points. Action Surge produced 77 points. Firebolt 51, Scorching Ray 12, Lightning Bolt 76, and Fireball 73. bringing Adrian's total damage rolled for this level to 1,208 points. Without Action Surge, Adrian's average per hit is 9.28, 1.92 below the baseline. With Action Surge added in, Adrian bumped it up to 10.06, which is 1.14 below the baseline. Finally, Varen, the Ranger, Hunter subclass, level 16. For subclass features, Varen used Colossus Slayer 47 times, generating 229 points of damage, which was 10% of damage rolled for this level. Steel Will was used 0 times, and Valdi was used 16 times, generating an extra 80 attacks, 69 of which were hits, for 86.25% hit ratio for volley alone. This added 633 points, 27% of Varen's total damage rolled. From general abilities, Sharpshooter was used 55 times, but only added 450 points. This was 19% of Varen's total damage rolled. Varen made 73 attacks this level, 63 of which were hits, for a 86.3% hit ratio. When volley was added, this becomes 153 attacks and 132 hits, for a hit ratio of 86.27%. Jump was used 0 times. Animal Messenger was used 6 times. Locate Animals or Plants was used once. Hunter's Mark was used 9 times, 3 of which were for spell scrolls, for a total of 58 points, 2% of level overall damage. Longstrider was used 3 times, 1 of which for a spell scroll. Spike Growth was used 3 times, for an additional 431 points, 18% of level overall damage rolled. Non-Detection was used 9 times. Plant Growth was used for battlefield control, and Locate Creature was used once. Favored Enemy was used 9 of 12 times successfully to track selected enemies, and Natural Explorer was used 122 times distinctively. Passive uses are harder to track due to their constant applicability. Primeval Awareness was used 3 times, and Lamb's Stride was used 22 times. Hide in Plain Sight was used 12 times, and Vanish was used 38 times, 35 of which were successful hiding checks. Hiding his trails in constant use unless deliberately chosen otherwise. With weapons only, Varen made 541 points of damage. 229 came from Colossus Slayer, 633 from Volley, 58 from Hunter's Mark, 450 from Sharpshooter, and 461 from Spike Growth, for a total of 2,342 points of damage rolled for this level. Varen's weapon damage per hit, not including the hits from Volley, comes to 8.59, 2.61 below the baseline, performing less efficiently than the Rogue and the Fighter. With all applicable non-magical damage, Varen's average per hit comes to 14.04, 2.84 above the baseline, and better than the Fighter, with Action Surge included. When all relevant damage is included, consequently excluding Spike Growth, Varen's damage per hit becomes 14.48, 3.28 above the baseline. Here you see the average per hit by level for all 3 characters compared to the baseline established earlier. This is strictly weapon damage, no unique class or subclass features, general abilities, or magic involved. The blue line is the baseline. The orange line represents Varen's progression. And I finally figured out how to switch Adrian and Thea's line colors back, so now the gray line again represents Adrian, while Thea has taken back the yellow line. Keep in mind, that the baseline assumes a constant enemy armor class of 15, which is not happening for most enemies in gameplay at these levels, and also does not take into account the possibility of critical hits, natural ones, advantage, or disadvantage. Further, this does include one unique aspect of the fighter, specifically that since the 11th level, the fighter can make an additional extra attack. Due to my own lack of preparation, I am currently not able to sparse that particular ability out. Now, however, let's add in the other applicable damage riders. The blue baseline is the same, but now all applicable class and subclass features, general abilities, and applicable magic are added in. Prior to the 11th level, the rogues, still represented by the yellow line, average per hit climbs and plummets almost level to level, but since 11th level has climbed more or less steadily. However, the rogue does remain quite high in efficiency compared to the other two, a direct result of using sneak attack. The gray line, representing the fighter, by comparison stays fairly consistent to the baseline, with occasional variance, despite the fact that the characters rarely deal with a consistent armor class of 15. Do note that this is not indicative of underperformance. Rather, it shows that even when not faced with consistent situations or enemies, the fighter is a highly efficient class to play. The Ranger is portrayed by the orange line and has an interesting progression. Except for 9th and 10th levels, the Ranger performs above the baseline fairly consistently, though obviously not in the same heights of efficiency as the Rogue. To note, this is roughly about the same point in the game where the Ranger switched to using a sling due to lack of wood for resupplying arrows. For the purpose of this discussion, efficiency is the ratio of useful outcome to the total input in any system, specifically the combat system of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. What is being displayed here is that the Rogue is the most efficient combatant. That is, the Rogue uses comparatively few attack actions to gain purely high damage results, so long as the Rogue can use at least sneak attack. The Fighter is perhaps merely efficient, rather than inefficient, because the Fighter stays so close to the baseline so consistently. The Ranger could be considered as a good efficiency combatant, performing more often than not above the Fighter and the baseline. With the efficiency of the characters established, let's move to the damage output. Appearing now on screen are each character's total damage rolled per level from 1st to 16th level. This metric is measuring the damage rolled, not damage dealt. This consequently ignores situational aspects such as immunity, resistance, and vulnerability. As the graph's title says, this is based on solely weapon damage rolled, without unique features like sneak attack, action surge, Colossus Slayer, or volley, no abilities like sharpshooter, and no magic such as Hunter's Mark or Lightning Bolt. It does, however, include extra attack, as this feature is much more difficult to sparse out than I had anticipated or prepared for. Consequently, the fighter's extra attack, gained at 11th level, is still being included on this graph. This metric should still help us determine how necessary Ranger's magic is in order to be comparable to at least the Rogue and the Fighter. Let's jump in. The blue columns represent the Ranger, the orange columns are for the Fighter, and the gray columns are for the Rogue. The Ranger has outperformed the other two classes 10 out of 16 levels. The Fighter has passed the other two classes 5 out of 16 levels, and if you are watching, you will see that these 5 occurrences are all post 11th level, when the Fighter gained the additional extra attack. The Rogue has passed the other two classes 1 time out of 16 levels. Thus far, the Ranger has dealt more damage 62.5% of the time, the Fighter 31.25%, and the Rogue 6.25%. These damage totals
do exclude the Ranger's magic and features, suggesting, so far, that Hunter's Mark is not required for a comparable performance from the Ranger, though it does help a little with the Ranger's combat efficiency. Further, this suggests to me that, so far at least, the Ranger does not need their magic in order to keep up with the Fighter or the Rogue, as the Ranger has surpassed the other two classes more times than not. But now, let's take a look at what happens when all the relevant features and abilities are added in. Now, class and subclass features, general abilities, and magic have been added in. This does include environmental damage, but note that this graph only includes damage rolled, not damage dealt. So if an effect hits more than one creature, I only capture the damage rolled. With that out of the way, the blue columns represent the Ranger, who now surpasses the two other classes 13 out of 16 levels, or 81.25% of levels played. The Rogue has surpassed the two other classes 3 out of 16 levels, or 18.75% of levels played. The Fighter has surpassed the Rogue 6 out of the 16 levels played, but has not surpassed the Ranger once. Out of 20 levels available, the Ranger thus far outperformed the other two classes 13 out of 20, or 65%, while the Rogue has outperformed the other classes 3 levels out of 20, or 15%. The Fighter has outperformed the Rogue only, not once the Ranger, and 5 levels remain out of 20 for the leftover 20%. This shows that, despite the Rogue's incredible efficiency, its total damage output is not to the same level as the Fighter, though on occasion the Rogue can deliver absolutely enormous amounts of damage. But the Ranger has, thus far, more often than not, outperformed the other two classes, with and without magic, with and without feats, with and without class and subclass features. I feel I should further point out that since roughly 10th level, Varen has relied almost solely on his sling, dealing only 1d4 plus dexterity modifier, while the other two have used longbow and rapier, both dealing 1d8 plus dexterity modifiers. Yet the Ranger has still been able to outperform. Only 4 more levels of gameplay await to be explored. I hope you're finding this analysis as interesting as I am, and that you will continue to explore the Ranger class with me, as well as joining Adrian, Thea, and Varen in the land of the Hunter. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.